Welcome to the On a Bubble podcast with your host, Demetrius McCray. Got a special guest joining us for episode 1. My roommate in college, Stephen Miller, coming out of Piscataway High School. Stephen's here to drop some gems on you, showing his life of being on the bubble. Hope you all enjoy it. What's going on, Stephen?
What's up, bro? How you doing, man?
Man, I'm good, man. I'm good. I appreciate you joining me today.
Of course, man. Anything.
Absolutely, man. But yeah, let's dive into this, man. So you had a non-traditional start to your college career, going into Nassau Community College. How did you decide to go that route?
Coming out of high school, man, I was struggling because I didn't have the grades to go to D1 college right out the gate, and I had struggles in the past regarding my grades and things of that nature. So one thing's for sure, I had a chance to go to a prep school or figure out an alternative to pick a lesser college, one that I didn't really think that I would enjoy. So I had the option to go to prep school or pick a junior college, and I didn't want to play high school ball anymore. I felt like prep school was high school ball still, and I wanted to go to the next level. So I decided to go to Nassau Community College. I'll never forget the offensive coordinator gave me a call one day out of the blue, and he had that New York accent, like, "We need you here, Miller. Like, you'll be the guy here." And he was so fired up that, it kind of pushed me to go ahead and make that jump, and I knew that Nassau was going to be a good fit for me. So
Offensive Player of the Year. That's a huge feat there. But you went on to App State, transferred to App State. What was that recruiting process like for you?
that was a little different. After my sophomore year, you do 2 years at JUCO. After my sophomore year, I had a few coaches come in and look for me. I had an offer from Akron on the table. I was waiting on Purdue. I've had talks with them. But my coach, who also played in the SoCon back in his day, I forget what team he played for, but he was very familiar with App State. And the funny thing is, I was just watching them the year before, and I believe they were playing either Dell State. It was either Dell State or UDEL. It was a team that they were playing on ESPN. It was snowy, and my first time ever seeing App State. And once he said that, I said, he was like, "Listen, I know a coach up at App State. They're a really good program. Blah blah blah." And this was my high school coach at the time, Coach Ciro. Shout out to Coach Ciro. He actually drove me down to App State for a visit. He got in contact with one of the coaches. I want to say, I don't want to lie. I don't know which coach it was, but he drove me down to App State. It was like on a 3-day whim, and he literally drove me uh, 12 hours up to Boone. And, we went out there, saw the facility, and, coming from Nassau, a junior college with pretty much no funding when it comes to the facility, the stadium, the equipment, going into App State was just like, one, it was culture shock, but then it was just like another, it was another level of excitement that it brought me in. After sitting down with coach and having dinner with him, it was almost automatic. He offered me full scholarship, and I just accepted it right there on the spot.
Absolutely, man. That's a special place at that, up on that mountain. So yeah, man. You had a hell of a career at App State. So playing your last game there, right? Going through your career there, played 2 seasons at App State, 1,300 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns your senior year, 4 receiving touchdowns your senior year. After you finish your senior year, graduate, what's next for you?
Well, the only option for me, well, not I won't say the only option. The only goal I had in mind was to make it to the NFL. You being my roommate, being one of the most dominant DBs in the conference and in the states at the time at the collegiate level, it became more real for me. You know what I mean? Seeing you receive the offer to the NFL draft, seeing the hype around your name, and me coming from a JUCO and just being in that environment, it was easy for me to feel like that was obtainable. You know what I mean? Um, I tried to, once you got your agent, I hopped on the bandwagon, got your agent. You know what I mean? Like, it was just everything. I feel like everything happened for a reason. And it became more real once I seen you go through the process. That just really helped me with, not only me putting my own film together, us going through the whole workout process, and then, the the pro day was really what was the icing on the cake. I had the stats, but I didn't have the stature. I was small. I was 5'6", probably 165 pounds soaking wet. I think the work ethic I put in the off season after my senior year was really what helped me, especially the pro day. And that was the ultimate goal, making it to the league and being able to provide for my family.
Absolutely, and that's the way
Yeah.
that we live, right? We lived on that mountain. We was grinding on that mountain. Being from a small school, but yeah, let's jump into draft day, right? We up in Cincinnati. We had the same agent. You know,
Hmm.
it was a
Yep.
great time those 3 days that we was up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Draft day, day three comes, right? Your name doesn't get called, right? So, what was your
Hmm.
expectation going into draft day when you finally got that call from what was your mindset there as well?
My mindset was work. That whole process was stressful, man, because we had been talking to Coach Bonamego, who was the special teams coordinator, and he was just calling, our agent every 5 minutes saying, we're thinking about picking them in the fifth round. We're thinking about picking them in the sixth round. We're thinking about taking them in the seventh round. You know, fifth round goes by, sixth round goes by, and then now it's the seventh round, and he's like, I think we're going to pick him in the next with the next pick. It's between him and a linebacker, Brandon Hepburn, my dog from who actually was in Detroit as well. So it was a roller coaster, but at the same time, it felt good knowing that at the end of the day, there would be an opportunity to play, in a league that, ultimately I could never see myself actually playing in. I just
Mhm.
knew I wanted to be there. You know what I mean? Coming from JUCO, first coming from a high school where there's been a lot of big names, but then going to a junior college, then going to App State, where these colleges I only had 1 year to really make something happen behind senior backs almost every year. It was surreal, man. And once I got that contract and was able to sign it, and they said, you come into Detroit, man. It was probably one of the best feelings in my life, man, for sure.
Absolutely. You talked about surreal, that surreal feeling. Like, what was going through your head day one, walking into the Detroit Lions facility?
Man, I'll never forget. I walked into the locker room. First of all, App State's locker room was way better. Right?
Okay.
So I'm expecting some extravagant, looking locker room. No, it's work, you know what I mean? But
Okay.
when we got up in there, man, I'll never forget. The first person I saw when I first walked into that locker room was Calvin Johnson. And remember, he was on the cover of Madden that year. It was either that year or the year prior. And, the first thing he did was walk up to me and introduce himself. He's like, "What's up, man? I'm Calvin Johnson." I'm like, "Bro, I know the hell you are, man. What's going on?"
Yeah,
And
man.
I'm trying not to get, yeah, like you back in China. I'm trying not to be all freaked out and ask for autograph, But for me, it was difficult only because there was so much hype around my name coming into the league as an undrafted free agent who had really good tape, and the fans and the writers were writing so many great things about me. But me, deep down, knowing that I'm here to be a special teams guy, and here I've been a primary back at every level and never really played special teams. So I knew it was going to be like a challenge for me, but I also knew that I was right where I needed to be at the time. So it
Yeah,
was great, man. I knew it was a challenge, but the fact that I was there was the blessing in it all.
absolutely. And we touched on
Mhm.
some great points there, and we're gonna get back to some of those points. But I wanted to ask you, you talked about Calvin Johnson, right? Any
Yep.
other player made you starstruck?
Yo, you Reggie Bush, man.
Yeah.
I was there with Reggie, bro. Like I used to watch Reggie's highlights before every football game in high school. You know
Yep.
what I mean? All of his USC highlights, like he was the reason I wore 5 in high school. You know what I mean? So for me to actually meet him and to really build a bond with him, that was really good. And along with the other guys, Joy Bell, Mikel Ashore, even Theo Riddick, who's from my hometown. We all were close knit group, and we all just wanted the best for one another, man. I think it was a really good place for me to be. I learned a lot. But everybody was a dog. I was there with Sue.
Yep.
I could go down the list. Matt Stafford. I was there with some big names, and I thought it was a great place, man. It was a good
Yep.
place for me to start my career, no doubt.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. that team in Detroit don't get enough credit. But yeah,
Mhm.
going through the preseason, going through training camp, everything like that, right? Did you have a welcome to the NFL moment?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I ever told this story, but we're at practice and we're in shells, right? So, for those who don't know, shells is upper body. We got, just the upper body pads on shorts. And I forget what the play was. It's either I caught a pass or I broke off in a run. And out of nowhere, Muhammad Sanu, boom. I don't even remember how it happened. I just remember getting up off the floor, off the ground. Yeah. That was it, man. That was one of those. That was one of those. I'm like, I don't know if I was concussed or what, man. But that was one of those moments. And then obviously in the games, man, it's a different level of hitting. You know what I mean? I know there's one highlight of me on a punt return. I think it was
Yep.
against the Browns.
I remember that highlight. I remember it.
One of the guys I almost broke off for like it had to be like an 80-yard touchdown run, and one of the
Yep.
guys like just when I was about to pass the kicker took one of my legs out and I did a flip in the air.
Yeah.
But my adrenaline was running so much, man, it didn't even matter. Like I was just so hyped. I didn't feel it, I felt it the next day, but it was a great moment, man. It was
Nice.
good. I had a
Yep.
couple
Nice.
good moments. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, man, your previous when you was talking about, coming into Detroit, but you was talking about, the hype behind your name. So going into Detroit, going into your professional career, even in college, right? What set you apart from just that 99%, and you being able to make it to the 1%, into the league? What set you apart?
Excuse me. I think it was my hunger, man, and my heart. I was small, so I knew that I had to bring something different outside of me being fast, outside of, me being this guy that could just, slash and dash. But I was also a guy that would try to run through you.
But you talked about all the hype that's surrounding your name coming into the Detroit Lions. So, what kind of set you apart going into the Detroit Lions? What set you apart going into college, high school, just overall your football career? What's one of that thing? What's something that set you apart from the 99%?
I would say the biggest thing would be like my attitude towards the game, man. My attitude towards the game was, I'm not the biggest, uh, but I'm definitely the toughest, and I played that way. Like I said, I was probably 160, 65 pounds, soaking wet. At 5'6", 5'7". Um, I didn't play that way. When I got to the league, I was pound for pound the strongest person on the team. But like I said, I played that way. I played with an aggression, with an anger behind me that probably was unmatched. I played with a, no, I don't give a fuck type of attitude. You know what I mean? And you know, it was one thing to be the slash and dash type of back, but it was another thing, this little guy at practice, we had DeAndre Levy, Stephen Tulloch. We had some dogs out there here, Whitehead. And in practice, when it's, protect the quarterback drill, I'm stepping up every time, I'm cutting people in line. I want to step up. People see DeAndre Levy coming. Nah, I want to step up. I want to try to block him. Muhammad Sanu, like, I didn't care. I was one of those guys. Like, I was a little, that little chihuahua
Yep, yep.
that that wanted to prove that he was tough. I wanted to be known as the toughest motherfucker on the field, and I played that way. You know what I mean? Whether I was running the ball or whether I was trying to block somebody, I played with no fear, and I feel like that's what really set me apart. Because when you play with no fear, man, you out there just having fun. Oh, it's like Pop Warner again. You can't play with that mentality. Like you have to have a
Yeah,
mentality.
yeah. And
You know,
I think that's truly what we do as a late round pick or undrafted player. We have to put in those extra hours, right? This is what on the bubble means. Right? You
right,
on the bubble, right? Every single thing that we do is criticized, right? We don't get those extra chances. We get one chance and that's it. And so you
right.
want to maximize all your chances that you get. And so, speaking about just on the bubble, right? This is what this podcast is all about. Is there a moment in your life where you felt
Yeah.
like you was on the bubble?
Man, come on. Every level,
Mhm.
man. Yeah, I feel like I was always on the ball, especially when it came to this game, man. My junior year in high school, balling out, I broke my leg, third game of the season. So now I have one year, to make it to that D1 level that we all dream of. right? Then I get into Nassau Community College, so I have to start off at a lower level than I wanted to. And I get there, and there's a guy from Florida that, I was better than, and everybody felt like I was better than, but he's a senior, and that's my dog. Shout out Nikita. You know, I have to sit behind him. And that next thing, my sophomore year, which is my senior year at JUCO, I got 1 year to make it to a D1 level once again. And then I get to App State. They telling me I'm a red shirt my first year and then have 2 years to start. And then we have a situation where one of the backs can't play. So here I am sitting behind Travaris
Yep.
Cadet, who goes to the Saints and balls out, and then I have 1 year to make it to the pros once again. So my whole career, high school, college, league, I've always felt like I was on the bubble, and I played that way. So that's why I live with no regrets. I played with no regrets, and excuse me, and it was, that was how I played, period, man. So that on the bubble is, you hit that right on the head. I've been on the bubble throughout this whole football career, so yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what this podcast is about, man. Is being able to give everybody an opportunity who lived that life on a bubble, playing professional sports, playing collegiate sports, who lived that life of not being the top dog, in professional athlete and who had to fight their way up, whether that's in high school, college, professionally, and get a chance to tell their story. So that's why I wanted to have you on, you my dog. And so yeah, I wanted to give you that opportunity to share
Appreciate
your
you, brother.
story. But talking about on the bubble, man, you talking about some of the grind that you put in through. What were some of the biggest sacrifices that you had to make, right? Obviously, you had this goal that you wanted to make it to the league, right? That comes with sacrifice. What were some of the biggest sacrifices that you had to make?
Yeah, man. I've sacrificed so much, man, for the game of football that it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to pinpoint just one thing. You know what I mean? Obviously, we sacrifice time. That has to be sacrificed in
Mhm.
order to make it to that level. But for me, the biggest thing that I've sacrificed, that's a good question. Because I'll be honest, man, my entire football career, I felt like football was taking me out of some things. You understand? So it almost felt like it wasn't necessarily a sacrifice, it was an escape for me. You know what I mean? From my background and what it could have been versus what it ended up being, football was the escape place for me. It was my happy place. It was definitely something that produced more good than harm in my life, man. So, and I don't know where I would be without it. Everything that was sacrificed, what I'll say is this: everything that was sacrificed benefited
Yeah.
me, in the long
Yeah, I
run.
think that's a lot of people's story
That's
too.
how I
That's
put
a
it.
lot of people's story, and I appreciate you going into that. Knowing an environment that you come into, is there a point where you thought about walking away from the game, right? Is it too much, right? Is the game too much?
Mm,
What made you keep going?
I'll be honest. Mm. What I will say is that we grew up playing this game where it was fun, and it's always been fun, right? Man, when you get to the pros, it's not fun anymore. It's strictly
Yep.
business, brother, and you see that, right? You see the difference, and this guy was drafted in the first round. This guy's a free
Yep.
agent. He's got a hell of a lot more opportunities to shit the bed. We gonna make him a star, before we make you a star. You might be better than him over there, but we ain't give you millions of dollars like we gave
Yep.
him. You understand? So seeing that and understanding the dynamic with that, it's politics at every level. But when you get to the NFL, man, it is a different beast, man. And and as it should be, right? But it's definitely it tarnished the game for me a little bit, especially coming in my rookie year when I balled out and still didn't get the results that I thought I should have and other people thought I should
Yep.
have. That's when it became real for me, man. You know what I mean? So in that aspect, I wouldn't change a thing because it made me the man that I am today. But it teaches you some things, man. And now me being in corporate world, I understand it a lot
Yeah,
more. You know what I mean?
absolutely, man.
Yeah,
Like I always tell people now, the NFL is it's the dirtiest business in the game, but I wouldn't have it no other way, right? I love the opportunity that I had in the
right.
league. I love what I was able to go through, in my
Absolutely.
time, in the league as well. I know a lot of people experience what me and you both experience of being on a bubble and try to try to chase our dreams and not having that many opportunities. But yeah, I get that 100%.
Hmm.
It kind of tarnishes the game a little bit. Up to college,
It
it was
does, right?
fun, and then once you get to that point in the league, it's
Hmm.
all business, and
All
you
business.
quickly find out that it's a business, and that person who's you know first round pick, second, third round pick are going to get the opportunities, even though that you might be better. They bring in a free agent that's
Hmm.
that's they're going to give him that opportunity. They have to
Yeah.
prove, the NFL have to prove that, hey, we took a chance on this guy, and so we got to prove that, our chance works out. And so people like us,
Hmm.
seventh round pick, undrafted player, we are on consider on the bubble, and so we got to fight for everything that we have now. Perfect.
Yep.
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 And I loved it though.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have it any other way. Definitely wouldn't have it any other way. But you talked about your corporate life now, so I want to jump into life after football. So, what does success mean to you now?
Hmm.
What are some of the things that you into now?
Well, success means a lot of things to me now, man. The most important, me being a father of three and a husband now, being a dad and being, no, not even a dad, just being a full-time
Yep.
father to these kids, man, and battling that's a game within itself, man. I got, three little kids and, managing that along with managing my career. I'm a safety operations business partner at Port Newark, New Jersey. So managing my career along with managing my kids, who are 7, 2, and 3 right now is more challenging than the NFL ever was,
Yep.
but I think right now the success is, me being fully in my career now while also training and also being a full-time husband and a father, man. That right now is the success in my story right now because, it's nothing better than coming home to, your wife and kids after a long day of work and getting to sit and feed them and play with them and just being around that kind of love, man. It's different. I never saw myself being in this position before, but despite how frustrating it may be sometimes, man, it is a beautiful thing, and I love it, man, for sure.
Absolutely, man. We can second that as well here in the McCray household. We can second that here. So yeah, man. Props to you and everything that you're doing,
Yes,
man.
sir.
One final question for you. Before we wrap it up here, but what advice would you give someone
Hmm.
living that life on the bubble? Have to go to a junior college, right? Going into a D1 college, and then sitting behind some great backs at a D1 college, and then going undrafted, making the best out of their career as well,
Mm.
and then spending some time in the CFL, right? So, what advice would you give someone who's living their
Right.
life kind of on the bubble and kind of in the shadows and trying to make it?
Well, the first thing is believe in yourself, man. You have to have that belief. If nobody else do it, you gotta believe, that you can do it, and you gotta work. The work will speak for itself. Put in that overtime. After practice, wherever you at, practice squad, whatever. Put in that overtime. Pull the starters up and see if they'll run reps with you after practice. Like that work that you put in will definitely pay off, man, because it paid off for me, and it's nonstop. I mean, you got to eat, sleep, breathe football, when you get to that level, man. And is be the first one in and last one to leave. I know it sounds cookie cutter, but that goes a long way with these coaches. It goes a long way with the owners. The work you put in, they record everything, man. So never give up on your dreams. Definitely work your tail off, and make sure they remember your name. That's what's gonna keep you around, and just do it until you feel like the time is up. Once you feel like your time is up, then you could move on to the next thing. Because football is only a stepping stool. It's the first step after college and things like that. You're gonna have a career after. So definitely use that as a stepping stone, as it should be used, and then move on to the next thing. But while you're in it, get every bit of juice out of that you can squeeze, for
Yep,
sure.
absolutely, man. That's some great advice for these kids coming up, coming into the league, going to college, just starting out their high school career. So, but Steve, man, I appreciate your time, man. I appreciate you catching up on the pod today. But yeah, man, look out for more
Yes, sir.
episodes, man. I appreciate it. Stephen Miller here.
Appreciate you.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of On a Bubble podcast. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel so you can hear some more great interviews.